Shana Tova, everyone.
Shana Tova.
Welcome, welcome. Good morning. It is so good to see everybody. A few announcements as we get started. For everybody's safety, make sure that your masks are over your nose and mouth the entire time that you're here. And if you do need to take it off, please just go outside. If you need to exit the building quickly for whatever reason, this is my stewardess impression. Your exits are here, 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 and here. Know where your exits are. Your cell phones, please turn them off. Your Apple Watches, turn them off. That way you can be fully present in the service as we are here. This year, Operation Isaiah is in full effect, collecting food and coats. Your donations will help feed and clothe our neighbors at the CAC and JF and CS. Thanks to Beth Sherman and our Social Justice Committee for making this happen. Second day Rosh HaShanah services will take tomorrow at 10 a.m. outside, weather permitting. If weather doesn't permit, we'll be back in here. Saturday at 4:30 is Tashlich. Join us at Azalea Park for the Temple Emanu-El Tashlich service, checking your sins into the Chattahoochee. And on Sunday, 9 a.m., we have our memorial service at the Temple Emanu-El section of Arlington Cemetery. For those joining us today online, welcome. Your Machzor will be pinned on your Facebook page. For those who are here with us in person in the service, this is our Machzor today. And just make sure that you have one of these. We want to express our gratitude to our co-presidents, our board of directors, and the many, many volunteers who make Temple Emanu-El the amazing place that it is. Your efforts allow the sacred light of this place to shine through. Temple Emanu-El is member-supported, future-driven. The faith and active engagement of our membership allows Temple Emanu-El to be a blessing for good in the world and into the life of every person here today. With me on the bima is Cantor Lauren Adesnik. We have our very own Ann Rollins on the piano. Stephen Blick, Executive Director, is working tirelessly to make sure that all of these venues and services happen, and we couldn't do this without him and his crew. I'm Rabbi Spike Anderson. Let's take a moment or two and turn around to the people behind you or in front of you and just say, hey, Shana Tova, it's good to see you. Do you have lips? Whatever it is that you want to say. If you're online, please give us a shout out. For everyone, whether you're with us in the sanctuary or joining us from your home, clearly this Rosh Hashanah is not exactly how we envisioned it to be. Nonetheless, Hineni, here we are, ready to enter into our new year with honesty and truth and hope. So let's take a nice deep breath together. Here we go in. Okay, you ready? Then let's begin. We rise for Baruch Hu, page 142. Friends, we remain standing, page 144. Together, in love, you bring light to the earth and its creatures. Your goodness renews the creation each day. Infinite, varied, and rich are your works, divine artist, all of them wrought with wisdom. The whole earth is teeming with life. Awestruck by the universe, work of your hands, let all life bless you, praise you, and celebrate the beauty of your lights. Page 150, we get ready for our Shema. Please be seated. The Haftarah can be found on page 152 and 153.
Oh, go ahead and turn the mic on.
בכל לבבך וכל נפשך ובכל מאודך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך ושכבך ובקומך ושרתם להיות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך ובטפת על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Page 160. Together, true and steadfast is this teaching, beloved and treasured, a source of wonder, a fount of goodness, a thing of beauty, and ours for all time. And true it is, the eternal God is our sovereign, the rock of Jacob, our protecting shield. Through all generations, God's name lives on. God's throne stands firm. God's dominion prevails. God's grandeur and faithfulness endure through eternity. God's words are precious. They will live forever. Micha Mocha, 164. Rise for the Amidah on page 168, knowing that we're coming into this space with yichus, a connection that started before us to our parents, our grandparents, generations back, all the way to Abraham and Sarah. We enter our prayer with authenticity and purity. 168.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu ve'imotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Omer Mushyahu Magen Baruch Atah
Bachu Baruch Shemo.
Magen Avraham Bezrat Sarah
Amen.
Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai B'chayei hakol Ata Rav lehoshia Mechakel Chaim B'chesed Mechayei hakol B'rachamim Rabim Tomech noflim Rofech olim Umatir asurim Umekayem emunato Lishenei afar Michamocha bal gevurot Umidor elach Melech memit umechayem Umatzliach Yeshua Michamocha el harachamim Zocher yitzurav l'chaim berachamim V'ne'eman atah l'chachayot hakol Baruch atah
Baruch
Adonai
Shemo.
Mechayei hakol
Amen.
Amen.
We'll close the ark. Please be seated. Page 173. These words that we'll share are the words of Rabbi Aaron Pankin, Zikaron Libracha. Our actions help us live in such a way that when we suffer life's darkest depredations, we will always have ways of coping with them. Our actions may not change the ultimate outcome one iota, but they alter our attitude, bolster our ability to withstand challenges, help us to handle unavoidable misfortunes better, and see life's value amid chaos and dismay. Page 174. And so a great shofar will cry, Tekiah, and a still small voice will be heard. Angels in a whirl of fear and trembling will say, Behold the day of judgment, for they too are judged. In your eyes, even they are not blameless. All who come into the world pass before you, like sheep before their shepherd. As the shepherd considers the flock when it passes beneath the staff, you count and consider every life. You set bounds. You decide destiny. You inscribe judgments. 178.
Rosh HaShanah, Yikatevun, V'yom Shom Kippur, V'yom Shom Kippur,
Together, on Rosh HaShanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, this is sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beasts? Who by famine and who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humbled and who exalted? But through turn to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can descend the harshness of the decree.
وتشوفها وتفيلا وتصدقها معبرين التراب
We gather strength as a Jewish people from generations to generation. Page 185.
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור, לדור ודור,
נגיד גאון לך. Try after me. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור, נגיד גאון לך. ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו, בפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. Here comes your part. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור, נגיד גאון לך. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור, נגיד גאון לך. כי המלך גדול, גדול וקדוש, גדול וקדוש אתה. כי המלך גדול, גדול וקדוש, גדול וקדוש אתה.
Page 191, Psalm 15. God, who is able to live for you and enjoy your holy presence? She who lives uprightly, works for justice, and speaks the truth. She who does not revile others or do evil to a friend or harass her neighbor. She who keeps company with others who love and revere God, but avoids intimacy with those who ignore and forsake her. She who keeps her promises and lives with integrity. She who lends money generously without expecting interest and will not condemn the innocent. She who lives this way will never be shaken.
Baruch atah
Baruch Shemo.
Adonai, HaMelech HaKadosh.
Amen. It goes without saying that this past year has been a really tough one for everyone. COVID-19 has taken its toll on our health, our school and work, and on our safety in ways that we never could have imagined. We had hoped that the vaccine would be the solution. But as we know, the human condition is still rife with inexplicable behavior. Like you, most days I feel frustrated. Some days I get scared. And once in a while, I experience a draining sense of fatigue. I have my moments. I do. Even my optimistic nature feels battered and torn. And this surprises me. I'm not used to feeling down. Fortunately, my wife and kids are usually enough to raise my spirits again. And of course, our synagogue community, with all the tremendous good that comes out of it, nourishes me. Like Rosh HaShanah morning, it renews me, and I need it. I look back on this past summer with a sense of longing, when the COVID numbers were low and a cautious optimism was in the air. While our kids were at camp, Marita and I decided that we wanted to reclaim some of what we had lost this past year. We wanted to see our friends. One night, we had dinner with David and Amanda Lower. He's the senior pastor at St. Luke's Presbyterian Church in Dunwoody. She teaches children at the Mount Vernon School. Most of the time when we get together, we laugh and talk about our kids and tell stories. But on this night, the conversation got serious, and it affected me. We talked about justice, how some people have it, while many others don't. For every 2 steps forward, we seem to take a step back. Hate and racial tension have been weaponized, and attempts for progress are challenged in every way imaginable. We talked about COVID, of course, but mostly how horrified we were that public health had been politicized to the point of self-destruction. We were doubtful, extremely doubtful, if anyone at all had the political will to set our nation straight, or the power to actually do so. Our bitterly divided America has become a cliché, locked in a cold civil war which threatens to boil over. And we talked about the environment. This was, for me, the most painful part of the conversation. Man-made conditions have finally erupted into record temperatures all over the world, with never-before-seen floods, a frequency of hurricane, and melting polar ice caps. Nations of the earth are slow to react when they bother to react at all. And the vast majority of humankind shrug their collective shoulders, feeling helpless, even as the clock continues to tick. What kind of world are we handing over to our children? My clergy friend asked me from across the table. What kind of life will they have? We began to search for solutions, grasping at every possible straw we could rationally think of. But each one was deemed highly unlikely or impossible against the intricate wall of intractable division. How could a people, a nation, a world who could not seem to agree on the most basic, self-evident facts hope to agree on any widespread, meaningful action? It would take a catastrophe, we decided, and nobody in their right mind would ever hope for that. Finally, out of reasonable options, we defaulted to, well, someone will step up, someone with clarity enough to cut through all the confusion, and charisma enough to unite our country and the entire world. Sounds like, I shared with the pastor, knowing it was a loaded suggestion, what we need is a Messiah. And he agreed, only if. Someone to appear like Superman in the distance, to rush forward in the nick of time to save the proverbial day. What is the Jewish view on the Messiah he asked me. I thought about it for a moment. It's complicated, I answered him, and it is. There's a lot of history and upheaval in the answer. But basically, I told him, in the progressive Jewish world, it can be summed up as there is no Messiah, and you're it. There is no Messiah, and you are it. This line isn't my own, although I wish it were. It's the title of Rabbi Robert Levine's book, written in the wake of September 11th, when our nation was at the lowest low we had felt in generations. In it, he traces the history of Jewish messianic thought and its evolution into our present-day Jewish consciousness. Now, let's clear the air for a moment. When I say the word Messiah, what do you think of? What do you feel? We Jews tend to have a visceral reaction to the word Messiah. I've been teaching a monthly Finding God class since I came to Temple Emanu-El. And when I asked them this question, their answers were very telling. First of all, even me asking them this question made them uncomfortable. The term Messiah evokes collective Jewish memories of forced conversions and anti-Semitism, of being accused and maligned. For many of us, Messiah is a Christian belief, and to an extent, at least in this day and age, that's mostly true. But it wasn't always so. The other answer that my Finding God class shared was that for modern rational thinkers, Messiah was a dangerous, wishful thinking, that someone was going to come in and solve all of our problems for us. However, we all agreed that the idea of Messiah, against the backdrop of a society feeling prolonged despair, was an audacious act of hope, one that we admired, even if we didn't share it. For what was the alternative? To accept that our situation is and always will be hopeless? That things could never get better? That we would inevitably continue to spiral in unyielding patterns of human self-destruction? Messiah, as we say in English, comes from the Hebrew word Mashiach, which means anointed one. Originally, Mashiach referred to high priests, emperors, and kings. They were all human beings with nothing supernatural about them. But with time, the term Mashiach began to take on a much more loaded context, one that reflected religious obsession with eschatology, the term for conditions that will lead to the end of the world. Understand that for Jews throughout our long history, exile and war, return and security had become the norm. Each time that we rebuilt our communities, we hoped that this time things would be different. But eventually, chaos and destruction would follow. This pattern isn't unique to the Jews. Most civilizations that rise will fall. But our response to the pattern became ingrained in our collective Jewish psyche. Rather than view the world nihilistically, viewing everything as meaningless, or that we are being punished by a vengeful God, a messianic theology developed that all of the war and upheaval that we are experiencing were actually the birth pangs of the Messiah, who would lead us not only back to the safety of our land, but would change the nature of reality itself. Yes, the wars and profound uncertainty were happening. No one could deny that. But they were happening for a reason, for a purpose, which meant that even if we didn't like God's plan, at least there was a plan. And we were, in our own passive way, part of it. We see this reflected in the high holiday imagery of the Sefer Chaim, the Book of Life, where our fate and God's will is recorded. But Rosh HaShanah, Yicha Tevun, Uv Som Kippur, Yicha Temun. On Rosh Hashanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, it's sealed. Who shall live and who shall die? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? I hesitate to reduce 3,000 years of Jewish history into a pattern. But each age of Jewish immigration and accomplishment was cut short by major historical upheavals. The spread of Islam and the Crusades, expulsions, and finally, at the end of the Jewish Renaissance in Spain, came the Spanish Inquisition. Each time tragedy befell us, Jewish fervor increased for the Messiah. When the Jews who fled the Spanish Inquisition found refuge in the Ottoman Empire, a small group of Jewish mystics moved into the mountain city of Sfat. There, with creative courage, they challenged this assumption of a calculating, punishing God in a profound way. Maybe we have it all wrong, they said. Maybe there's not an all-powerful God who's doing this to us. Maybe God is, like us, broken and scattered. Maybe God is, like us, battling forces of chaos and evil. Maybe God is, like us, trying to heal and become whole. They saw the world as broken because God is broken. But rather than despair, the Kabbalists put forth a worldview of Jewish empowerment unlike anything seen before, and leaned on Torah stories, the glue of the Jewish civilization, that put each of us as individuals and we as the Jewish people in partnership with God to tikkun olam, to heal the world, one intentional act at a time. We call these intentional acts, as they are prescribed in our tradition, mitzvot. In this way, the Jews of Sfat posited, just as we need God, God needs us. We're partners in this endeavor. Without us, God would remain limited. Without us, the world would remain broken. This theological reframing reclaimed the sacred Brit, our covenant with God, but with an orientation that empowered each of us, that required each of us to actively and intentionally do our part. Then, and only then, would both God and the world become healed and whole. And who would benefit from this redemption? The Jews, of course, but not only the Jews. Everyone. All people. the world. Theirs became, for the first time, a universal messianism. The Kabbalists of Sfat were way less focused on any one individual Messiah, but rather they strove for a messianic age. We Jews, each of us, were the absolute key in creating a just reality conducive for all people to be safe, healthy, and secure. Lo yisogoy al goy charev, velo yimodun od milchama. Nations shall beat their swords into plowshares, and nations shall know war no more. A time when everyone will be able to sit beneath their vine and fig tree in peace and unafraid. Lo b'shamayim hi. It's not something beyond us, they claimed, but rather it's well within our grasp to fully realize our potential as a vital partner with God to fix our broken world. Jewish messianic thought has evolved from a Messiah who will deliver us back to our land, to one who will change the reality of the world, to a messianic age where we will each be part of bringing about the conditions that we dream the world could be. However, all of these messianic ideas that we Jews have had have one thing in common: a longing, a desperate yearning. The world is broken, yes. And the Jew at her core, at his core, yearns to fix it, to nourish it, to heal it. The world is a mess, yes. And it's perfectly human to throw up our hands and have doubts about being able to change anything. But the yearning, the longing, the striving to make things better is the core of Judaism and the texture of what it means to be a Jew. Proverbs tells us that when there is no vision, the people perish. Perhaps the idea of a messianic age is less accurate than to say that we're on a messianic journey with no guarantees of success. Our Jewish vision has evolved into directing the very best of who we are towards justice and peace and love. Then will everyone sit beneath their vine and fig tree in peace and unafraid. This is what it could be. This is the vision. But we have to do the work. Modern Reform Judaism has taken this to its logical conclusion. There is no Messiah, we say. At least there's no one person who's going to come and fix everything for us. And you are it. You're the one. And so is the person on either side of you and on either side of them. The one. But we can't wait. You are needed. Far from helpless, Judaism assures us you have the power to love more deeply, to be more compassionate, and to better engage the world around us. That's our charge. That's what we've been telling ourselves for hundreds of generations. This is our mission. I know, ours is a demanding tradition. It can feel overwhelming that Judaism asks so much of us. This is what we mean on Rosh HaShanah when we talk about tshuva. It's an acknowledgement that we can become more than we currently are, better than we have been. And this has huge implications for each of us and the world in which we live. That life is about more than just roaming the earth. The years that we have, in the end, come down to meaning. What kind of husband or wife could I be? Sister or brother? Child or grandparent? Citizen of the world? Jew? Congregants at Temple Emanu-El? These questions help us reorient ourselves, return to the vision of how we can do the sacred work of protecting each other and healing our surroundings. As long as we keep our Jewish vision before us and engage in the relationships that allow us to do the work, then we can each see ourselves as being part of the same messianic journey, one that our people have been on since time as we know it began. There is no Messiah, and you are it. Shana Tova. We rise now for the great Alenu, which will be found on page 202.
Page 205. Ribono shel olam, power of all, have compassion on the souls of Israel. Open their hearts to do tshuva before you. Open their souls for the sake of returning to you. Dwell on each sound of the shofar. Contemplate its meaning. Tekiah, one whole note. Shvarim teruah, 3 broken notes, 9 staccato notes. Tekiah, one whole note.
My return to the right path has the power to make me whole again. Tekiah, once I was whole. Shvarim trua. In the wear and tear of living, I became broken and shattered. Tekiah, my tshuva, has the power to make me whole again. Page 206 for the shofar blessing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. Amen.
Please echo the cantor's call.
Tekiah.
Tekiah.
Shvarim teruah.
Karim v'teruah.
Tekiah.
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 Shvarim.
Shvarim.
Tekiah.
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 Teruah.
Teruah.
Tekiah.
Tekiah.
הרשת שפתנו ירב לפניך, ערם ונישא. הרשת שפתנו ירב לפניך, ערם ונישא. מבינו מאזין מביט ומקשיב לכל תקיעתנו, ותקבל ברחמים ברחמים וברצון סדר מלכויותינו.
We remain standing for Avinu Malkeinu, page 223. Please join with the cantor in the English.
Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, hear our voice.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and on our families.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu, Va'al Ol Aleinu V'tapenu.
Together, Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kolei Dever V'cherev V'ra'av Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kolei Kol Tsar Umwastin Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, enter us, our names in the book of lives well lived.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kodvenu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chadesh Aleinu, Shana Tova.
Avinu Malkeinu,
Almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu v'Haneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu v'Haneinu, ki Emanu Ma'asim. Aseh Emanu, tzedakah v'chesed.
Please be seated.
This is the last time that I will stand in front of you as president or co-president. And I appreciate the fact that that was not an applause line. I want to start my comments as co-president, Robert Wittenstein, by thanking my wife, Susan. For the last 2.5 years, she has afforded us the flexibility to revolve our lives around the lives of the synagogue, and that has not always been easy. So I want to thank her for her flexibility. I also want to thank our members. It is a big commitment to be a member of a synagogue, and we could not do the important work that we do without your help. And we don't say thank you enough, so thank you. I'm also very conscious of the fact that I am standing on the shoulder of giants. The lay leadership over the years has positioned Temple Emanu-El for growth and for strength, and I am very grateful for that. I am also very thankful for our clergy and staff. This has been a really difficult year for them. I particularly want to call out our executive director, Stephen Blick, who is, I think, the hardest working person I have ever had the privilege to work with. I also want to thank my co-president, Edie Disner, and our board of trustees for their passion and their energy. I've struggled to find the right adjective to describe this last year. On the one hand, we have suffered the worst pandemic in our lifetimes. We did not, as a group, escape sickness and death. On the other hand, we have been touched much more lightly than many, many other communities, and for that I am really incredibly appreciative. On the one hand, we have had synagogue families who have struggled financially this year. Despite an increase in the number of members, our dues revenue last year was down 13% as a result of families who have always paid full dues in the past being able to pay less this year. On the other hand, we had 46 families who volunteered to increase their dues payment to cover that shortfall. And we had more families who raised more funds than in any year in the past. Not quite there yet. On the one hand, our building was closed for much of the year, and that made it very difficult for us to connect as a sacred community. On the other hand, while that building was closed, we were able to accomplish an amazing, awesome renovation of our Brill Social Hall, our kitchen, and we created, with the help of a dozen or more families, the Schiffer Family Terrace Chapel, which we have been using weekly, and the Goldstein Patio, which is below it. These have been transformational spaces, and in that sense, it's been just a remarkable year. Thanks to some very generous donations this last year and the federal PPP program, the synagogue's finances are pretty solid. We are in better shape than we have been in recent memory. As a result of that, we have an opportunity this year to focus our attention on the endowment fund. Imagine if the temple had the funds to support all the programs and services that we've been wanting to do. There are really an enormous number of possibilities. And that's why we want to focus on the endowment fund this year. Today, we rely exclusively on dues and on individual fundraising campaigns to meet our annual expenses. These efforts help tremendously, but they vary from year to year. If we can build a significant endowment fund, we can create another source of reliable annual income for Temple Emanu-El. The endowment fund will provide a steady income over time, and the congregation needs these funds for new initiatives. I ask you to stay tuned for more information on the endowment fund in the year to come. The other thing we're going to focus on this year is the Havarah program. At its heart, Temple Emanu-El is a sacred community. Everyone needs to feel connected, not just to the clergy, but to one another. For those of you who are not familiar, a Havarah is a group of 10 or so families with similar interests who meet regularly to create community and share experiences. So here's my call to action for you this year. If you're in a Havarah, work to strengthen it this year. If you're not in a Havarah, or your Havarah has become inactive, commit yourself to joining a Havarah this year and being part of a meaningful and lasting relationship with other Temple Emanu-El members. It has been a rare privilege and an honor to help Temple Emanu-El over the last 3 years, and I am deeply, deeply grateful. HaShanah Tova.
Thank you, Robert. Friends, we're going to rise for our Torah service, page 228.
Adonai, Adonai, God, compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving, and true, showing mercy to the 1000th generation, forgiving evil, defiance, and wrongdoing, granting pardon. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh V'Nora Shemo, Gadlul Adonai iti, Uneromema Shemo Yachtav, Lecha Adonai HaGedula, VeHaGevura, VeHaTiferet, VeHaNetzach, VeHaHod, Ki Hu B'Shamayim U'Va'aretz, Ki Hu B'Shamayim U'Va'aretz, Lecha Adonai HaMelacha, VeHaMitlaseh L'chol Rosh. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, Ve'yishtachavu Lehar Kodesh. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, וישתחוו להר קודשו. כי kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Join with me. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu וישתחוו להר קודשו. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu וישתחוו להר קודשו. כי kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. We sing that again. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Yai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai.
Our traditional Torah reading for Rosh HaShanah is Genesis 22, also known as the binding of Isaac. In response to God's command, Abraham is poised to literally sacrifice his son Isaac in a fanatical display of loyalty. Satisfied that Abraham was willing to do this deed, God stops Abraham from taking his son's life by sending an angel to stay the descending knife. For now I know, says the angel, that you fear God, that you've not withheld your son, your favored one, from me. Now, I've always found this story to be incredibly disturbing. You should know that our sages were disturbed by it as well. And so in every generation, our people have argued about what the Akedah means and what we're supposed to learn from it. Some of our sages argue that God's ultimate actions were meant to warn Jews that God actually does not want human sacrifice, despite what other nations might do in the name of religion. That we Jews, above all else, value life and living. Fine, you say. Choose life. I get it. But it's still a super disturbing story. So why do we have to read it every year at Rosh Hashanah? The answer to this excellent question we glean for Rosh Hashanah's other name, which is Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembering. We read the binding of Isaac every year because we are a forgetful people. And we live in a world of competing values. Most of the time, we can be proud of how we conduct ourselves. But we may look at the world around us and be tempted to fall down to the lowest common denominator. We don't succumb to this temptation because we keep reminding ourselves and each other that we are Am Segula, God's special people, picked to be partners with God to help right the world's wrongs. And so now, without further ado, as we've done for hundreds of generations, we'll wrestle with the Akedah. Our Torah service continues on page 230 with the Torah blessings. The Akedah can be found on page 240. Our cantor will call up the honors.
For the honor of blessing our Torah, we call Sherry Gummer, and for the honor of sharing our first Torah portion, we call Artie Gummer. Ya'amdu saramaka la'aliyah la'Torah.
Baruch Adonai Havarach Le'olam Va'ed. Amen. Yasher
Sure,
koach.
Koach. I'm going to fix the mic before I go call up our next honors. For the honor of our second Aliyah, it is my pleasure to call forward Jaron and Asher, Jaron Pearson, Asher Lubin, and their clan. So please come forward. Ya'amdu Michael ben David, Chassi Bronzi, Bat Penina, Eliyahu Menachem ben Yitzhak Meir v'Rachel Miriam, Tzipporah Elizabeth Bat Penina, Penina la'aliyah LaTorah. Let's start with the blessing.
Baruch Adonai Havarach Le'olam Va'ed.
For the honor of our third Aliyah, I call to our Torah, David and Eva Arkin. Ya'adu bat sheva la'aliyah LaTorah.
Baruch Adonai Habarach.
Baruch Adonai Havarach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Habarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Habarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Asher B'chabanu Mikol Hamim V'natalanu Et Torto. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayavohu el hamakom asher amar lo ha-Elohim vayiven sham Avraham et hamizbeach vayaroch et ha'etzim vayakod et Yitzchak beno vayasem oto al hamizbeach mimal atzim vayishlach Avraham et yodo vayikach et hama'achelet lishchad et beno vayikro elav malach Adonai min hashamayim vayomer Avraham vayomer hineni vayomer al tishlach yadacha el hanar va'al to'os lo me'uma ki ota yadati ki yor Elohim ata v'lo hasachta et yidacha et v'dcha et yechidecha mimeni.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natalatu Torat emet v'chei olam nata b'chotenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher Koach. For our fourth Aliyah, our fourth and final Aliyah, it is my pleasure to call forward the Miller family, Allison and Scott and Mindy. Ya'amdu Shmuel ben Yitzchak, Chava, Yitzchak ben Shmuel v'Chava la'Aliyah LaTorah.
Adonai HaBarach.
Baruch Adonai HaBarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaBarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayisa Avraham et einav vayar v'hine ayil achar nechaz b'sivach bekarnav vayelech Avraham vayikach et ha'ayil v'ya'alehu le'ela tachat beno vayikra Avraham shem hamakom hahu Adonai yir'eh Asher yamer hayom bahar Adonai yera'eh vayikra ma'ach Adonai el Avraham she'init min hashamayim vayomer binishbati na'um Adonai ki ya'an asher asita et hadavar hazeh velo hasakta et bincha et yechidecha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chaye olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher Koach. Beautiful.
With the open Torah, oh. A lot of moving parts. With the open Torah, we get ready for our Misha Berach prayer. The Misha Berach prayer can be found on page 245. This Mishabara prayer, of course, is our prayer for healing. The idea that we would call out for healing for those in our lives in need. Healing of mind, of body, of soul, of relationship. As is the Minhag HaMakom, I ask everyone to rise. If you have someone next to you that you are comfortable putting your arms around, go ahead and do that. If you have nobody, feel my arms around you. Here we are, Mishabara 245.
Bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu Mekor habracha lavoteinu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Refuah Shlema. Remain standing, page 246, for the lifting and rolling of the Torah.
V'zot HaTorah asher sham Moshe livnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai v'yad Moshe. Yanai lai lai lai, yanai lai lai lai, yanai lai 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 lai, yanai lai lai, yanai lai lai lai, lai 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 lai, one more time. Yanai lai 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 lai, yanai lai lai lai, yanai lai lai lai, lai 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 lai, yanai lai lai, yanai lai lai lai, yanai lai 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 lai.
Please be seated. Our Haftarah reading today, we see a woman named Hannah who more than anything wanted to be pregnant. She and her husband Elkanah had been trying for years with no success. And our Haftarah reading conveys the deep pain that this caused them. And so Hannah prays to God for a child. But she doesn't just pray, she prays with such honesty and desperation and truth that our rabbis chose this story to be our Haftarah reading for Rosh HaShanah. In other words, they say, Hannah's prayer to God becomes our model of what our most heartfelt reaching out to God could be as we travel this deep journey into self in these days of awe. Our prayer before Haftarah can be found on page 247. Hannah's story can be found on page 251. Our cantor will call up the honors.
For the honor of chanting our Haftarah blessings and also chanting our Haftarah, we call up to the podium Logan Katz.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar b'nviim tovim v'ratzah v'divrehem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai haboher b'torah u'v'Moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amo u'v'nviei ha'emet v'asedek. Vayomer elecha Eli ad matai tishtakarin hasiri et yenei me'alai vata'an hana vatomer lo Adoni isha keshet ruach anohi ve'yain ve'shechar lo shatiti va'eshpoch et nafshi lifnei Adonai al titein et amatecha lifnei bat Bilial ki merov sihi vechaksi dibarti arhena ve'yan eli vayom ahi leshalom ve'lohei Yisrael itein et shelatech asher sha'al me'imo vatomer timsa shefatecha hen be'enecha v'telech ha'isha l'raha v'tocha ufanecha lo hayu la'od.
Please find the blessings following our Haftorah on page 259.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sor kol haolamim tzaddik b'chol hadorot ha'el hane'eman ha'omer ve'oseh ha'medaber u'mekayem shechol devrav emet v'asedek al ha'torah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al ha'nevi'im ve'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh ve'al yom ha'zikaron hazeh Shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likudashav limenucha lechavod u'tifaret al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach u'mevarhim otach yiparashim ha befi kol hai tamid le'olam va'ed u'veracha emet v'kayam la'ad Baruch atah Adonai
Baruch hu Baruch Shemo
Melech hakol aretz Mekadesh HaShabbat v'Yisrael ve'yom hazikaron.
Amen. Beautiful. Friends, join me on page 272 as we pray for our country, America. Together, God of holiness, we hear your message, justice, justice you shall pursue. God of freedom, we hear your charge, proclaim liberty throughout the land. Inspire us through your teachings and commandments to love and uphold our precious democracy. Let every citizen take responsibility for the rights and freedoms we cherish. Let each of us be an advocate for justice, an activist for liberty, a defender of dignity, and let us champion the values that make our nation a haven for the persecuted, a beacon of hope among the nations. Page 274, Prayer for Israel.
Avinu Shebashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo, Baruch et Medinat Yisrael, Rishit Tzmichat Geulatenu.
Together, Avinu, you who are high above all nations, states, and people, Rock of Israel, the one who has saved us and preserved us in life. Bless the state of Israel, first flowering of our redemption. Be her loving shield, a shelter of lasting peace. Guide her leaders and advisors by your light of truth. Instruct them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who build and protect our holy land. Deliver them from danger. Crown their efforts with success. Grant peace to the land, lasting joy to all her people. And together we say, Amen.
Avinu Shebashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'goalo, Marechet Medinat Yisrael, Rishit Tzmichat Geulatenu.
Please rise as we return the Torah to the Ark, page 277.
Eitz Chaim hi l'machazikim ba v'tomecha me'ushar deracheha darchei noam v'chol netivoteha shalom hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem.
My precious teaching, I have given you my Torah, don't forsake it. A tree of life to those who hold it fast. All who embrace it know its happiness, its ways of pleasantness, all its paths are peace. Take us back, Adonai, let us come back to you. Renew us in our time, the days of old. Elenu, yes, page 288.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol, lateit gedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kegoye haratzot, velo samanu kimishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. Page 291, there are stars up above, so far away we only see their light, long, long after the star itself is gone. So it is with people who we have loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. As we approach Mourner's Kaddish, I would ask those in the Shloshim period of mourning, those who are in the first 30 days of a loved one's passing, to rise now so we can recognize you, both here in the sanctuary and from your homes. Please remain standing. If you're in the first year of mourning a loved one's passing, we ask you to rise now so we can recognize you. Please remain standing. If you are commemorating the yahrzeit, the death anniversary of a loved one's passing, at this time, I ask you to rise. And if it is your custom to rise either in solidarity or for those who have no one to say Kaddish for them, I ask you to rise now. Mourner's Kaddish can be found on page 292. Yikadal v'yikadash me rabbah, ve'oma divrach irute, ve'amlich machute, ve'chayechon v'yomechon, uv'chayedecho Beit Yisrael, v'galav v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehe shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam olomei almaya. Yit baraf v'yishtabaf v'yit pa'ar v'yit raman v'yit naseh. Vita dar vita le vita lal shmei dekutsha brichu. La'ela michol berchata v'shirata. Tush berchata v'nechamata. Damiram bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imru mav. Huya aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Page 301, remain standing for the shofar calls. Please repeat after Cantor.
Tekiah Gedolah.
Tekiah Gedolah. May be inscribed and sealed for a good year, everybody, to you and your families, healthy and happy. Shana Tova.
Lishana Tova Tikatevu. Lishana Tova Tikatevu.